For some reason, whenever a pawnbroker's on television and he does something bad, he's on the news, everyone assumes every pawnbroker does it. When a doctor's in the news and he does something bad, no one ever assumes all doctors are bad. It's just, for some reason, it's pawnbrokers. The thing is, Hollywood's vilified pawnbrokers, and it's just not right.
One of the 4 men who built Pawn Stars is dead. One ran away to another country. One got caught with enough guns to open his own gun shop. And the last one is standing alone in that same shop right now, selling swords to nobody. Here's how a hit TV show slowly lost an entire family, one small decision at a time. Rick Harrison still stands in that shop, telling America a 200-year-old sword is worth 11 grand. Same shelves, same voice that's narrated 15 years of America's junk drawer. But there's no old man leaning on his cane anymore. No Corey arguing over a motorcycle he overpaid for. Just Rick, doing a version of the show that's technically still filming, if you squint. Here's what nobody tells you about Pawn Stars. It didn't die from one scandal. No single arrest ended it. No network boss pulled the plug in some big meeting. It just ran out of family. Back in 2009, this show had everything. 3 generations of the same last name, plus a guy nicknamed after a cartoon walrus, all arguing over price tags in a tiny shop. 7 million people watched every single week. It became the #2 show on cable. Bigger than American Pickers. Bigger than almost anything else on History that year. It aired in 150 countries. Now, in 2026, the show sits on what everyone's politely calling an indefinite hiatus. That's just a nicer way of saying it's over, and nobody wants to admit it yet. So what actually happened to this family? Because it wasn't one bad decision. It was 20 years of small ones, stacking up until nobody was left to stack them. Richard Harrison didn't grow up dreaming about pawn shops. He grew up in Danville, Virginia, joined the Navy at 17, and spent 20 years on ships, working his way up to paymaster, the guy who handled the money. He came out the other side with a real head for numbers and almost no money of his own. In 1981, he packed up his wife Joanne and their 3 sons and drove to Las Vegas with $5,000 to their name. Not $5,000 in savings. $5,000 total. Vegas in the 80s chewed up dreamers like that for breakfast. They opened a tiny buy and sell shop. For 8 years, Richard fought the city just to get a real pawn license, actually tracking population numbers himself, because the law only allowed 1 license per 50,000 people. Picture a grown man checking census numbers like their lottery results. In 1989, the population finally crossed that line, and the gold and silver pawn shop was born. His son Rick grew up behind that counter. So did Rick's own son Corey, who started working the floor at age 9, which is either a sweet family tradition or straight-up child labor, depending who you ask. By the time he was grown, Corey was running 30 employees and outspending everyone else in the building. Add in his childhood friend, Austin Russell, nicknamed Chumlee after an old cartoon walrus. Apparently a totally normal nickname to still be using in your 30s, and you had 4 guys who weren't hired to play characters. They already were the characters. History Channel just had to point a camera and get out of the way. This wasn't a casting call. This was a real family that happened to be interesting enough for TV. 3 generations, 1 friend, 1 shop, arguing about guitars and rare coins for a living. And that's exactly why what came next hit so hard. When a real family starts falling apart on camera, you can't just write out the character. The character is somebody's father, somebody's son. The first crack didn't even come from a Harrison. It came from the guy everyone loved the most. On March 9, 2016, police showed up at Chumlee's house with a search warrant tied to a sexual assault case involving someone else. He never got charged in that case. But while they were there, they found something else entirely. 12 guns, some legal, some not, including rifles he had no right to own. Meth, marijuana, digital scales, baggies. The kind of setup that made a detective write in an actual police report that the amount of drugs looked like someone dealing, not just using. 19 drug charges, 1 felony weapons charge. The internet's favorite comic relief was suddenly facing real prison time. He took a plea deal that May, 3 years probation, counseling, and he had to give up the guns and drugs. No jail. He kept his job, and the show kept airing. But something had shifted. The guy who made you laugh every episode now had a police report with his name on it that read like a serious criminal case. Chumlee survived it. Corey didn't get off that easy, mostly because Corey kept giving the world more reasons to embarrass him. Back in 2011, Corey already got arrested in a bar fight in California, shoving a security guard and a police officer before things calmed down. Fast forward to September 2023, and he's behind the wheel of a truck at 2 in the morning, swerving so badly between lanes that police need a loudspeaker just to get him to pull over. Bloodshot eyes, slurred speech. A sobriety test he apparently failed. The breathalyzer at the jail was broken, so they had to draw his blood instead, booked for DUI. His excuse was 1 drink on a flight hours earlier. This is the same guy who lost almost 200 pounds on camera years earlier, dropping from 402 pounds down to 210 after weight loss surgery. A procedure Chumlee would later go through too. But losing all that weight didn't stop the DUI arrest more than a decade later. None of that, though, was the ugliest fight in this family. That one didn't involve police at all. It involved Rick's own mother. In February 2022, 81-year-old Joanne Harrison sued her son. Her own son. The lawsuit claims that back around 2000, while she was still recovering from a coma in the hospital, Rick had her sign over her 51% ownership of the pawn shop. She says she didn't fully understand what she was signing at the time. Her husband, Old Man Richard, told her not to worry, that Rick would take care of everything. Then Richard died in 2018 from complications tied to Parkinson's disease, and Joanne inherited his remaining 49%. According to the lawsuit, she never got a straight answer about where $500,000 in silver and $100,000 in cash actually disappeared to. She says Rick paid her $25,000 a month for living expenses, then quietly cut it to $20,000, then stopped paying her completely in March 2020, with no explanation given at all. Rick's response was blunt. He told reporters the claims were false, and that his own 81-year-old mother was being used by people looking to profit off her. Sit with that for a second. This was a show that spent 16 years selling America on the idea of Harrison family loyalty, and behind the cameras, the family patriarch's own widow was in court accusing her son of cutting her out of everything her husband had spent a lifetime building. Take a breath here, because the next part of this story is heavier still. In January 2024, Rick's son Adam Harrison was found dead in a guest house in Las Vegas. He was 39. He was never a cast member and never appeared on the show, not even once. But he grew up in that family, worked at that shop, and spent his 20s cycling in and out of rehab while his father tried everything to pull him out of addiction. The coroner ruled it an accidental overdose, a mix of fentanyl and methamphetamine. Rick would later say there's nothing worse than losing a child, and that he replays it constantly, wondering if there was something else he could have done. 4 men built this show. By 2024, one of them was dead of natural causes. One had a felony drug and weapons plea deal on his record. One had multiple arrests, including a DUI. And one had just buried a son to the very drug crisis he'd publicly warned America about. And somewhere in a Las Vegas courtroom, an 81-year-old woman was still waiting for someone to explain where her silver actually went. The cameras kept rolling through almost all of it. That's the part that should really bother you. This wasn't a show that collapsed all at once. It was a show that just kept filming while the real family behind it quietly fell apart. One lawsuit, one arrest, one funeral at a time. Here's a question worth actually asking, though. Other reality shows survive scandals all the time. A cast member gets arrested, the network puts out a statement, and the show just moves on. Storage Wars lost one of its biggest stars when Dave Hester walked off and sued the producers, and the show kept going anyway. Antiques Roadshow has swapped out its hosts for decades without missing a beat. So why did Pawn Stars actually fall apart? Because Pawn Stars never had a cast you could swap out. That was the whole business model. You weren't watching actors pretending to work in a pawn shop. You were watching an actual family run an actual business. 3 generations deep, with real blood and real money on the table every single day. Replace someone on a dating show and the show barely notices, because the format was always bigger than any one person. Pawn Stars never had that kind of safety net. The format was the family. Break the family, and you break the show. When Old Man Richard's Parkinson's got worse, and he stepped back around 2017, the show lost its moral center. The guy whose quiet nod of approval actually meant something. When he died in 2018, it lost him completely. There's no casting call for new grandfather. No. Audition for guy who's seen everything and isn't impressed by any of it. Look at what happened to the 3 men left standing. Chumlee spent the rest of his career with a felony plea deal attached to his name. Forever, the guy who nearly went to prison over what police suspected was a drug operation. Not exactly what you want next to your comic relief. Corey piled up legal trouble on top of legal trouble, eventually admitting on record that he was tired of playing a character at 41, that the show still wanted acting like he was 23. And Rick, the one holding everything together on camera, was privately locked in a courtroom fight with his own mother while also burying his own son. Nobody here got fired. They simply got outpaced. Real life moved faster than any reality show could edit around it. Corey didn't quit the show. He quit performing a version of himself that stopped being true the moment his whole world fell apart. He landed in Tulum, Mexico, where he's actually rebuilding something of his own. He's become friendly with the town's mayor. Local police stop by once or twice a day just to check on him, take a quick photo, nothing more. He's developing a barbecue restaurant with local investors called Big Hoss's Smokin' Joint. And in 2025, he launched his own podcast with a former Pawn Stars producer, finally telling his own story with no dad, no producers, and no script telling him what to say. Then, in January 2026, he crashed his motorcycle in Tulum and nearly died. A hard reminder that leaving Las Vegas didn't mean leaving danger behind entirely. Back in Vegas, meanwhile, Rick and Chumlee started their own podcast, too, with no official tie to the network at all, quietly keeping what Rick calls the bubble of gold and silver pawn alive on their own terms. The shop's still standing on Las Vegas Boulevard. Tourists still walk in hoping to spot somebody famous, but the family that made this show worth watching scattered in 4 different directions, and no amount of good lighting was ever going to fix that. For a long time, this show sold America something real. Not strangers competing for a rose, not a fake tribal council on a beach, a genuine family business. 3 generations under one roof, arguing about a Civil War rifle the way real families argue about everything. That honesty is exactly why 7 million people showed up every week. It's also exactly why the show couldn't survive what came next. You can't script your way out of a father's Parkinson's disease. You can't edit around a felony weapons charge. You can't cut away from a courtroom where a son stands accused of cutting his own mother out of her inheritance. And you definitely can't keep the cameras rolling through the death of a 39-year-old son and still call it entertainment. The fantasy held together for almost a decade. Then real life did what real life always does. It stopped waiting for a good take. 4 guys built an empire out of honesty. In the end, that same honesty is exactly what tore it apart.